Hello and welcome to Decoding Your Canine. Thank you everybody for so much for joining us. If you're watching on the replay, make sure you say hello. But right now we have Sada with us. Now, Sada, can you maybe just say your name? I know Sada is the shortened version of your name. But
it's Saharai, or Sada for short.
All right, I'll call you Sada because I can say that. But thank you for joining us. You are from, and I've got it here, Wolf Mother. I'm just going to put this up here quickly. So Wolf Mother Canine, which is a rescue organization, but also training. It's such an amazing, what you do is amazing, I just have to say. But everybody make sure you ask questions in the comments. Sada, let's talk about... I know before we came on, you were telling me about a case that you've got that's just come in that's really interesting, that's in the shelter. Do you want to maybe tell us about that?
Absolutely. So I was just explaining that I just actually got back from one of the shelter sites that I contract with about half an hour ago. We have a really interesting aggression case. So this is a young puppy. He is between 3 and 4 months old is what we think. He did come into the shelter very, very young, and he's been there for quite some time. And the staff has been reporting a severe resource guarding in the kennel, as well as difficulties returning him back to his kennel. So one thing, the way I always like to start out these assessments or evaluations or analysis, if you will, is figuring out, what, again, these underlying emotions or experiences these dogs are having. So the first thing I like to do is get them outside of that environment, that really noisy, chaotic environment, take them out into a yard where it's much quieter. There's a lot of space for them to explore and go to the bathroom, which a lot need to do, and also play with them. Just let them burn off some energy and get a lot of that stress out of their body. And I did find that we did see the same things returning this dog back to its kennel, this puppy. Immediately once we entered the building, the kennel building, we saw him hesitate. He put on the brakes. He was pulling back, and getting him back into the kennel, he was starting to try to push out very, very frantically. And if you try to use any part of your body to block him from getting out, he would very, very severely bite and hold on and just start chomping down on your hand. And unfortunately, This puppy, he does have 2 documented bites, and they did break skin, unfortunately. So that is a very serious situation for a little puppy in a shelter. I was working with the staff member as well, who has a great foundation in behavior, but she just wanted to know, what can we do in this situation? And especially she wanted to know what she can do to prevent it from getting worse, at least. So I know a lot of us may jump to, well, it's being a naughty puppy, it needs to be corrected. But again, as you guys heard in my discussion, it's all about wellness and empathy and really trying to understand what this dog is experiencing in the shelter environment. So again, they don't have a lot of opportunities to express natural behaviors. He really doesn't get to just be a puppy and have fun and live this carefree life where he's learning and growing and bonding and forming these positive relationships with people or other animals. So trying to work with these behaviors in this kind of environment can be very, very challenging. And the one thing we really wanted to focus on was how we can get this puppy back in the kennel without getting that biting response. So what I really liked about this experience working with this staff member, and I did tell her, a lot of this is just trying to figure out what works, but we always have kindness and empathy and really trying to get the behaviors that we want, but because the dog feels better about the situation. So the first thing I wanted to do is stop that rehearsal of behaviors, the biting. But again, we weren't looking towards punishment or corrections. We actually found out that a very easy exercise. So before we brought the puppy in, I actually went to the back of the kennel. I just dropped a couple of spoonfuls of wet food in the back of the kennel. So as soon as we brought the puppy inside, he saw that wet food and he's like, all right, I'm ready to go. I actually want to go in my kennel. I get something good out of it. And he was no longer rushing towards the front. We didn't get any biting responses. And for quite some time, he was able to sniff around the floor and on his bowl. And we were able to continue being next to those high value resources, but he was already forming a positive association. And even once he was done, his interaction with us kennel side was beautiful. So it was, again, very obvious to us. There was a lot of frustration, a lot of stress inside that this tiny little thing was experiencing. So by looking at it through a lens of wellness rather than a lens of compliance, or why isn't this puppy listening to me, we can utilize a very simple exercise or technique to facilitate bringing the dog back, which will first and foremost allow more staff members to take him out. And the more he's out, the better he's going to feel. The more breaks he gets, the more he can relax and exercise and play and just be that puppy. So we can get a continuation of those behaviors that we're seeing outside. So very social dog, very in tune with us. So he's already offering nice, beautiful sits and being heavily reinforced. So he is bonding with the staff. But that is one of the tricky things that we often encounter in this kind of environment, is these behaviors that are a manifestation of these stress and anxiety and fear that a lot of these dogs are feeling within that shelter environment.
So, I mean, that's quite interesting behavior for a dog that's so young, isn't it? Do we have any idea what his past history is, or did the bites occur in the kennels, like, or was it before? Was it something that happened before?
Yeah, that's a great question. So unfortunately, this puppy did come in as a stray, and he came in by himself. So when we see these behaviors at such a young age, one of the first questions that I often have is this hereditary, or is there some kind of genetic component? But because we don't have that owner information, or we can't get a hold of the litter mates or the dam and sire involved in the breeding, we can't make those connections to see if any other blood relatives are also exhibiting these behaviors, especially at a very young age. What was very promising to me is that the puppy did not exhibit these responses anywhere but the kennel. So that is one of the distinctions that I really wanted to make was, is this something that is likely largely influenced by the environment, or is it more of a generalized behavior? And I know in some cases it can be learned, but the research is still out on that too. So they did have some research where we looked into neglect cases specifically, where we know the dogs were starved, to see whether or not they would exhibit such responses like resource guarding behaviors. And we actually found that there wasn't a very strong correlation. So a lot of dogs that did undergo some kind of restriction with feeding wouldn't necessarily exhibit these resource guarding behaviors later on. So we are still trying to figure that out. But where we stand now, I do think that these behaviors are at least largely exacerbated by what he's feeling in that specific environment, especially that kennel. And we actually tried, we worked with him around food in a different indoor building. So that's a different kind of pressure. So we're no longer outside. They don't have complete freedom to escape if they feel uncomfortable about a situation. There's still four walls around us, some bright lights. But even then, the puppy was very receptive to us being around him and feeding him, hand feeding him around the food. So, but again, as soon as we walked in, it was very, very clear in that kennel row, he just started really, really stressing out. So, I mean, first and foremost, I just feel bad for them. I do feel a pity and, again, empathy, and wish we could do more, at least on the design level and the way the industry is run, to help support these little guys, especially. It's a tough environment to grow up in.
You do amazing stuff, though. I mean, how many dogs do you think you've helped throughout the time you've been working in this?
Yeah, so it's at least, I'd say, around 2,000 a year. And
Wow.
it's quite a bit. Usually when I go to a shelter site, they'll have a list of at least 6 to 10 dogs for me to look at during that day. But one thing I don't like to do is I don't like to rush these analyses, especially if it is a euthanasia listed dog and it's their life hanging in the balance. I absolutely take that very, very seriously. It's not something that should ever be taken lightly. But a lot of times there can be not quick fixes, but at least simple techniques that we can teach the staff that they can continue utilizing, so we can now help a greater number of dogs if everyone is on board. And we really do try to focus on simple techniques that can be easily integrated into their workday, that won't take a lot of time and don't necessarily take a lot of expertise either.
Yeah. If anyone's got any questions watching this, please, maybe it's about your own dog and dog reactivity and dog aggression. This is the lady you need to ask the questions of. But so let's talk about dog. So I really like your approach to, the aggression side of things. You do look at the what else is going on. It's like taking a holistic approach. Like what would be some of the things a dog comes to you? What would be maybe the first thing that you do that would be, your observations? I guess you try to take a history if there is one, if you've got that information, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the very first thing I actually look for is any medical or biological conditions that may affect how the dog is feeling physically, mentally, psychologically, which will affect the emotions as well. So I've listened to different resources and read from different resources, but the estimates can range anywhere from 30 to 80% or more of aggression cases have some form of medical or biological component. And that's really, really important to understand, especially if we look at it again through a lens of compliance. If a dog is simply acting a certain way because it's trying to communicate that it's experiencing discomfort or pain, and we work to correct that behavior or punish it, that is highly unethical to me. And unfortunately, dogs can't describe or explain what's going on. And I know my example is always, what if my dog has a headache? They wouldn't necessarily limp, they wouldn't necessarily have diarrhea, but they're going to feel terrible. I can only imagine how a dog like that would then behave around me or other people or in normal situations, because it's not feeling its best. And so because they're unable to communicate that is absolutely the first thing I recommend that we rule out or look into. And this can be quite comprehensive depending on the case. We have worked with some dogs where we suspect there may be a neurological component. I know we had a private client where it was a bull terrier, and we suspected canine compulsive disorder. So the dog version of OCD. And for bull terriers specifically, a lot of the symptoms can be chasing of the tail. He actually had to have his tail amputated because he would chase it and destroy his own tail so much. And during those spinning episodes, would hit his head over and over again and become very scarred. If he was left alone for long periods of time or in a kennel, he would start to lose a lot of weight. Clearly, he was suffering. And not coincidentally enough, this dog also had a very extensive bite history. So he had a lot of handling sensitivities. Another thing we noticed about him was every time he would get up, he would limp on one of his hind legs, his hind right leg. So this is all signs to us that this dog isn't feeling their best. So of course I would expect in some cases, that communication to get to that point if it's not being properly addressed. So that's the very, very first thing that we do. And we always follow a plan of agency. So if you guys look at any of our videos, especially on Instagram, you'll see a lot of my work is, especially in shelters, just getting the dog out of that stressful situation and then leaving them alone in a yard. So often I'll just let them roam around, they'll explore, they'll go to the bathroom again. They often haven't had this opportunity to do so. So a lot of these dogs holding in their urine and feces for hours at a time, that's going to be very uncomfortable. So I allow the dogs just get used to this new environment. And if they want to engage with me, they can. But one thing that's really important for me is understanding, even if a dog comes up to you, it's not necessarily an invitation to be pet. And I know that's really, really difficult for us because it can be almost a reflex. They're cute, they're cuddly, they're furry, and a lot of them like engaging with us in that manner. But there's a lot of dogs that also don't, especially if they are experiencing a stressful situation or have in the recent past. And a lot of us like to look at a behavior and say, what happened in that moment, or ask ourselves, what happened in that moment. But one thing I learned at the Aggression in Dogs conference this year is events that happened 24, 48, even 72 hours prior to a bite incident or an aggression incident can have lasting impact. So when we have something like this happen, we do need to ask ourselves, what was today like? What was yesterday like for our dog, even the day before? So much like us, we can undergo this very stressful event or situation and still carry a lot of that stress and anxiety and those emotions with us throughout the rest of the week even. So granting these dogs just that consideration and that kind of empathy and allowing them to bond to us as they feel ready, rather than forcing ourselves on them, especially when it comes to handling and petting, I feel is the best way to set them up for success. And generally speaking, if this is the approach that I have, whether it's a dog in a shelter or a dog in a client setting, we will form a positive, lasting relationship the vast majority of the time. I would say over 97%. There are cases where there's a lot more going on and it does take more time, but that agency in the beginning, that freedom to, hey, I understand you're stressed out right now. I'm going to respect your space. And when you're ready, you can come bond with me. That alone makes such a huge difference when we're working with aggression cases.
Yeah, that's crazy. The lovely Diane she's one of the speakers on the summit. I've read out. So Diane Jarrett, you talk about 30% of dogs having unresolved pain in your talk, and then listed several questions. What pain issue stands out as common in shelter environments, and how do you as a shelter behavioral worker deal with these dogs in any pain situation? Really?
Yes. So I would say the most common ones that we see, and one of these will be an assumption on my part. So we do see a lot of GI upset in the shelter, and it's very, very distressful for me. The dogs cannot communicate that they're in pain, but that is one of the most common forms of, I would say, at least discomfort that we see in these dogs. That's often chronic as well. But following up with that, we'll also see some lameness, some possible arthritis. We see some dogs with mobility issues, and I feel we're seeing a lot more of that with the influx of backyard breeders that we're seeing a lot of here in the United States, and just people that aren't considering the health and wellness when they're breeding these animals. So that is the first thing I try to identify. But one of the challenges that we do face is these dogs are in confined spaces as well. So if they're not moving around a lot, there is a chance we may not be able to pick up on that. We also do see a lot of prevalence of infections. So upper respiratory infections, we see outbreaks of giardia, we see outbreaks of kennel cough. So they don't necessarily fall under the standard definition of pain. But again, I'm assuming that these conditions will at least garner some degree of discomfort that will then affect the behavior. And for me, it's so important to have a really good relationship with the vet staff. So we do work closely with them. And that's not just because they're treating these animals, they're also handling them as well. So often we'll come to a situation or a case where the dog has built a relationship with me, but the vet staff haven't necessarily come and interacted with this dog in any way. They're dealing with the ones that are brought to them as medical cases as they arise, but maybe they've never even seen this dog before and they're having issues taking this dog out. But then we have the issue of, hey, this condition has to be treated. We need to at least get a weight on the dog so we can know how much medication or what the dosage will be. So I like to really work closely with the vet staff. I'll often have them work with me if I'm working with a dog or evaluating them. So that way we can pick up on anything we see. And that is a really important part for me when I'm doing my evaluations. I am being extra mindful and very observant to see if I pick up on any abnormalities as the dog is outside with me that perhaps the vet staff or even the care staff at the shelter haven't yet identified, because their only exposure to these dogs are, again, passing by very quickly, feeding the food, cleaning the kennel, and then going about their day. But these kennels, again, are really small. But that's important to me, is really identifying it quickly and getting that treatment plan on board. And as the dog is undergoing these treatment plans, we're not really doing any training. So my focus is always just supporting them physically and mentally as they're getting better. So we offer a lot of enrichment. If the dog is able to get out of their kennel, we're offering a lot of exercise too. I will often recommend that we house them in the quietest part of the shelter so we can, again, speed up that healing process and not put them in these situations where they're maybe feeling pressured by doing some training. It's like, hey, I understand you're undergoing something, you need to heal, so we'll just do our best to support that.
Yeah, I love that. That's so important. I'm not sure who this person is. Unfortunately, with StreamYard, it just comes up with Facebook users. Sometimes I can't see who it is. Yeah. But Sorry, maybe if you could, whoever wrote that, maybe write your name and a comment, and we can see who you are. So I have a very highly strung border collie, which came to me with severe OCD behaviors and also absolute lack of stimulus control, no frustration tolerance, eye contact, non-existent, with very high desire to control any movement. Sounds
Yeah.
like a colleague. Any advice on how you would work with her unpredictability? She can go from 0 to 200 in split seconds. I don't allow people to pet, as she doesn't cope with anyone getting in her space or being stared down, direct eye contact. Yeah.
Awesome. That definitely sounds like a tough situation, and I empathize with you. And especially, I feel when we're dealing with such an intelligent working breed, it can compound some of the challenges that we face. Absolutely. I would again in this situation fall back to making sure we rule out anything medical. So especially if we see phobias or high sensitivities to triggers, movements, noises, I would like to support the body biologically so we can maybe raise that resilience enough so any exposure therapies we do following that will be much more effective. So one of the issues I often run into with clients is we are trying to do exposure therapies, or they may have tried to in the past, but we're not addressing the biology of what their behaviors are, the biology driving these behaviors. So especially when we're dealing with very high nervousness, anxiousness, that could possibly lead to bites or aggressive responses or episodes, I really want to support the body as much as possible. And I know psychopharmacology can be a tricky subject and it can be controversial. I know personally, I love integrating it into a holistic treatment or wellness plan if it does support the dog through these difficult times or even throughout the day. If the dog is experiencing generalized anxiety and generalized stress, and the dog doesn't have very many opportunities to recharge their battery and recover from experiencing this stress, then a lot of the behavior modification won't be as effective as if we were helping support that body too. So there's a lot of different options that you can discuss with your vet. There's a lot of over-the-counters to methods that you can use too. There's a lot of people that like using calming collars. There's the little Thunder Buddy shirts that offer some deep compression for them. But I always like to stress, definitely watch your dog if you're integrating any of these techniques and make sure that you're not making them more uncomfortable for the sake of trying something new. So just like us, every single dog is different, and I've had varying degrees of success with different tools and techniques. So I just like having more things in my toolbox so I can try them in case one or two things don't work. But a big part of my focus in cases like this is making sure we're meeting those biological needs and evolutionary needs as well. So is the dog getting enough mental stimulation? Is the dog getting enough rest? So rest is such an overlooked component, I think,
isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. So a lot of our dogs do need to rest or sleep upwards of 16 hours or more a day. And if they're not getting those opportunities, then we can see a lot of these anxious or stress-based behaviors not just manifest, but become worse. So I really try not to force my dogs to sleep. So often I will try to create an environment that promotes it on its own, and also, again, support my dog. So if my dog has a lot of energy we need to get out, we can exercise, we can play, we can try some training games as well to engage their minds. But again, this is all positive to me. I'm really trying to address the underlying emotions and what this dog is experiencing rather than jumping to corrections or punishment methods. So definitely support that dog biologically and really advocate for their space too. So a lot of times too, we can get a little bit comfortable, especially if our dog has displayed, hey, I'm okay with this specific person in this situation. That means go ahead and pet them. It's also understanding that their tolerances and what they can really, I guess, just tolerate in that day or situation can change. So me in the mornings, my tolerance is way lower than it is midday because I'm often a little bit tired, a little bit groggy, I'm hungry, I have things I need to do in the morning. But if you were to try that same interaction later in the day, I might be much more receptive. So understanding each dog's unique abilities and coping mechanisms and strengths and weaknesses, and really respecting that. And for me, with a lot of these nervous cases, I really do have to advocate for a long time. So making sure we have built a consistent expectation that people will respect my dog space no matter where we're at, no matter who we are around. And that may take some time, especially when we're undoing these negative associations that have conditioned these responses. It takes a long, long time to undo it and then reform that positive association through counter conditioning. So the biggest thing, definitely advocate for your dog. I would highly recommend reaching out to your veterinarian and making sure you address maybe any underlying issues that are possibly contributing to that. But advocating for your dog, creating a nice, safe, quiet environment in your home so they have a place to recover and recharge in the event they experience some stress out in the world as well.
Yeah, so it was Tamara that wrote that, and she has had a vet check by the looks.
Okay, perfect.
I think, like, you know, for a dog it's really interesting, the whole rest thing, and we'll get to what she's written here. But, you know, dogs with generalized anxiety, once they get onto medication, they often sleep more, and then the owners will be like, oh, my dog's turned into a zombie because of this medication, without actually realizing that maybe your dog needed to have that rest, maybe because, you know, border collies, they're going to go
Yes.
unless we create an environment, as you said. So Tamara says, rest, absolutely, thank you. First thing I worked on, switch off, yes, as that dog never slept. There you go. Yes, she is very good working dog on both cattle and sheep. Oh, so she's getting that genetic outlet.
Yes,
then.
fulfillment. Yes, that's really important.
Stops walking her in town so she isn't overstimulated and over threshold.
Yeah, find outlets for her that she loves that will not stress her out or push her over that arousal threshold. So we're fostering that Malinois right now, and she's very much the same way. She is go, go, go. And she does start to get very anxious. She becomes very restless if she doesn't know what to do. And this can even be, so we can walk or hike for 7 miles, come back, and she will still be like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So I like to dim the lights. I'll play some jazz in the background. I will put some goodies, some enrichment items. So she really likes just crunching on the balls. So I'll place those on the mat for her wherever she likes to normally relax. So she's still feeling that amped up energy, and she needs an outlet for it though. I can't just go lay down, stay still, and you're just supposed to cope with that. So I do want to give her some outlet for that energy, but she is naturally slowing down. And this has become a ritual now. So every time we come back from a walk, I will give her some item that she can enjoy for a long time. And now naturally she's going to her mat or her bed. She's laying down to enjoy it. And within maybe 10 to 15 minutes, that dog is out. And of course, in a couple of hours, we'll get up and do it again. And she does need that repeatedly because of her breed and her specific requirements for energy and stimulation. But that rest, that incorporated rest throughout the day has helped her so much. And every single day, because we've been consistent with that schedule of making sure she is fulfilled and having those breed fulfilled kind of activities and exercises, but integrating that rest has just helped her gain weight again. So she came to us very skinny. She's gaining weight now. She's sleeping throughout the night. So before she would hear any of us move around in bed, and she would get up like, are we ready to go again? Now I can get up and go use the bathroom, and she stays in bed. She's not tethered or in a kennel. She just naturally relaxes. So that is our goal, is integrating rest just as much as the enrichment, just as much as the exercise or training, to help round them out. And again, really approach this in a holistic manner.
Well, I know myself, if I don't get enough rest, I get really cranky.
No, absolutely.
But my boy, I've got Malinois, so same high energy, but they do have off switches in the house. And what's really interesting is when I, in the evening go into the room where we watch the TV, they're almost all three of them get quite excited because they're like, oh, we know we're all going to come in here and chill out, and the whole pack's together, like husband's there as well. And we all just go, right, now we rest. And it's really interesting. Like the boy in particular, he's like, yay. It's like, are you serious?
Exciting. Everyone's together. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's hilarious. It's so lovely to hear that your Malinois is doing well, though. Well, not your Malinois, although,
Oh my gosh. We have bonded so strongly. She does really like my fiance, but you know how they pick their person too. And I mean, she's just my little partner. We've grown to love her, and we are shifting a little bit of focus on the services we're offering. So we are taking a step back from boarding a little bit. We do have it open for our clients that we've had consistently. We've developed a great relationship with their aggressive dogs, and they love it here. So it's like their staycation, and we take them to the beach and have a good time. But our focus is right now helping out these shelters, and especially pet guardians that are struggling with their dogs, so we can prevent them from ending up in a shelter, or maybe someone who adopted a dog and is facing some challenges. So again, we can support them in a way that keeps the dog out of the shelter. So that may open up some room for us to foster fail very closely in the future.
I don't know how you do it. Like, I mean, I don't know that I could foster in the sense that I would be a failure for sure. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, I think we've had probably close to 50 dogs come through here in the past couple of months. Yeah, quite a bit.
Wow. And I mean, for you, we all have these dogs that come into our lives, and you just fall in love with certain ones, don't you? I don't know, that must break your heart when you have to give them up.
Yes, definitely. We've unfortunately come across a case where we were very close to keeping this dog, and we had to drive down to Southern California, about 800 miles round trip, to pick up a different one that was also recommended for euthanasia. So we're often left in this position of who do we help? We only fostered him for about a week, the dog that we originally had. Excellent dog, just very, very stressed in the kennel. He did get adopted 2 days after we returned him to the shelter, so it was a temporary foster situation. We don't know what happened in the home. He was returned, and he had no fur. He had lost so much weight. He had 2 ear infections, and it appeared that his leg was also broken. And it was actually a very, very sad day. I saw him in a kennel, so I was working other dogs, and I saw him there as I was passing by. And I said, whoa, what's going on? I call my fiance, explain the situation. He said, okay, we will pay the adoption fee for the next person who wants to adopt his dog. And I offered free behavioral support. So free training. If they needed pet sitting, we would help out. And the staff went to lunch, and I said to my fiance, as soon as they get back, I will let them know our offer. And as I approached them with this, they said, we euthanized him. So that broke my heart. It broke us. It absolutely broke us. That's actually him right here. Aww. So we only had him for a week, but he's our baby. And we actually wanted to bring the body home. But we were told we don't know what barrel he's in. There's so many dead dogs in barrels that we can't find him. So I never got to bring him home. And this was kind of my memorial to him. And that happened. It was almost a little over a year ago, but we're left with this regret now. So there is always that thought in the back of our heads when we foster a dog, especially a behavior case, the outcome isn't guaranteed. Even if we place them ourselves, we tell people if there's any issue whatsoever, the dog needs to come back to us. We will have space for them. There's always a place in our home for these dogs. But we can't control people's actions. And we did have a discussion in the shelter that would no longer happen. Any case like that, they would discuss with me first. And we would have actually sent him to a specialist to figure out what happened and heal him. We knew it was going to be a financial commitment and time, but we loved him. And that's the tough part, is not every case makes it, whether or not it's a behavioral case. He was actually such a friendly dog, but we're seeing more and more dogs unable to cope in these shelters. And people have this idea that, hey, my dog is friendly and they'll get adopted quickly, not knowing that kind of environment can place such a vast and intense degree of stress that your dog may become aggressive in a shelter. And it's not because they're bad dogs or because they're innately aggressive. They just can't cope with that environment and the inability to, again, express these natural behaviors and be dogs and even get a sense of safety or predictability. So it's definitely a difficult conversation to have, but it's an important one that we need to integrate and really talk about so we understand the position that we're in this industry.
Yeah. Facebook user, sorry, I'm not sure who that is. How far do you travel to shelters, and what is the process?
Yeah, so far we are working with local shelters. So we are located in California and we travel throughout the state to work with shelters. Some contracts that we have, they do want us there on a regular basis. So there's two shelters where one I'm starting at very, very soon, but there's one where I'm there multiple days a week, multiple hours a day. And there's others that contact us on an as needed basis. So we will travel across the state, upwards of, again, 800 miles or more to look at one dog. So if it's
Wow.
a serious situation, we will go out and fly out and help people. And it's not just about evaluating or assessing these dogs as to whether or not we feel they're safe candidates for adoption, or providing that insight on how to move forward and progress and work with this dog safely and kindly. We also train staff and volunteers. So we do understand, for me, there's only one of me. So it's my biggest mission to train and teach everyone who's interested in learning how to work with these dogs, so they in turn can teach and train others. And we have this ripple effect, so to speak. But if there is anyone who works at a shelter or knows of one that may need assistance, definitely reach out to us. So we are open to traveling wherever we are needed. We'll make it work. We'll take a vacation out of it too. And we're here to help the dogs, but we're here to help the people and everyone involved in this mission and this journey as well. So that's a great question.
Yeah. So how do you vet adopters? Oh, good question. So much can go wrong with the wrong environment. Is there a process?
Yeah, so this is such a great question, and it is one that shelters and rescues have had challenges navigating for as long as I can remember, and it's still ongoing. So there is definitely, I feel, an art as much as it is a science to do meet and greets. And for me, it's all about asking the right questions. And if I feel a dog may not necessarily be the right fit, I don't want to tell someone like, I don't think this is the right dog for you. You need to not adopt them. Rather, it's an art of asking them the questions that gets them to the answers that we want them to consider most. So what is your lifestyle or experience? A lot of people get or want to get these higher energy or high drive dogs thinking they will make them an active person. And we find that is rarely the case. It has happened. But if
I get it. Like, oh, I want to get some more exercise. I'm going to get this.
Yes. Yes. If you're not already vetted and invested in that kind of commitment, the chances that your dog is going to completely change your lifestyle is very, very slim. So that is something that we absolutely want to take into consideration when asking these questions. Experience level is really important too, especially when we're working with these behavior cases. Have you dealt with fearful dogs before? Have you worked with aggression cases before? And if you have, what are the specifics of that situation? So we really have to get detailed with these questions and not just say, for me, the answer of the dog bit me isn't enough. What were the circumstances? How often did that happen? What was the situation? What was the bite inhibition? Was the dog exhibiting any loading or warning signs beforehand? Was there any high value resources, petting, handling, strangers involved? So really getting down to these details will help us determine the best fit for these dogs. And unfortunately, there will be cases where we see that people will lie. They will give us the answers that we feel or they feel we want to hear. And it does take a lot of practice and exposure to recognize the signs. We do home checks.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
Yes, we do multiple meet and greets. And it's actually really, really interesting that you bring up this question, because the trend of shelter behavior and placement in the United States has very recently switched to lowering or removing barriers to adoption. So there's shelters that are not even requiring dog to dog meets anymore. So they are sending home the dogs, and it's really interesting. So I do see both sides of this. So a lot of people say, it's really hard to adopt a dog. Maybe the shelter staff doesn't know really what's going on. Maybe these dogs are exhibiting behaviors that, again, are not necessarily going to translate into the home. So are we holding them back unnecessarily? But we also have to balance that out with cases are absolutely real aggression or real fear, or a little bit more complicated than your normal or average pet dog that may exhibit maybe some reactivity or a little bit of stranger danger, but has not yet reached the point of having multiple bites. So really understanding that, and not rushing it. So I will not take the first person or the first application or first interest. Really understanding for me that we need to have the dog and the family's best interests in mind. So working with them as many times as possible. I've done like 6 or 7 meet and greets for certain dogs before. So there are cases, yeah, where we do really have to take a little bit more time and consideration in terms of placement. But unfortunately, there isn't any surefire way that we can prevent these bad things from happening down the line. And what's really hard is a lot of organizations like don't do background checks, and even if they do, you know, what's going to pop up. So a lot of shelters that are trying to move towards open adoptions, there is always that risk. But the positive side of this, or silver lining, is that we don't really see a lot of cases of neglect or abuse happening. We do see more cases actually working out. We get a lot of updates from people too, and shelters do as well. So knowing that it is absolutely working out, but it is definitely, I call it like a dance. It can be very, very tricky, but learning which questions to ask can really help that process out.
I think what is also really encouraging is you've got these dogs that have got issues, and yet you're still finding those special people that are saying, right, I know that this dog has, you know, maybe some reactivity, but I'm willing to work on it, with your help, obviously, and willing to give this dog a home. I think that's really special that you can find those, you know, there are people out there. But I wanted to ask you, what does a dog have to do to end up on the list for euthanasia?
That's a really good question. And I feel a lot of people would think that it just takes severe aggression to end up on a list. And that is definitely one of the top reasons. But to be honest, most of the dogs that come in to shelters aren't aggressive. So one of the leading causes, unfortunately, for euthanasia is kennel stress. So it's when dogs are unable to physically, psychologically, emotionally cope for long periods of time in the shelter. And one thing that we like doing is weighing dogs. So we weigh them on a weekly basis. Every time we have them out in a yard, for that specific week, 1 day a week, we'll make sure that we're keeping on top of these physiological signs that they're either improving or they are deteriorating as well. So that is unfortunately one of the most heartbreaking reasons why we see euthanasia is dogs withering down to a third of their body weight. They are spinning in their kennels all day. They can't sleep. They are smearing feces all over the walls. A lot of dogs that came in friendly and social are now exhibiting some form of aggression or aversion towards people now, when we know they're not like that. But there's situations where shelters have, you know, 20 dogs coming in on one day. Only one dog got adopted and it got returned the next day. We have an owner surrender wait list of 250 dogs for one shelter. There are shelters in Southern California that have euthanasia lists of over 100 dogs in a single day. So once we understand that that's the position that we're in, it often comes down to who's not coping as well or who's not improving. If we have fear cases and they're just not improving, that's a big, another big reason why dogs will eventually go on that euthanasia list. Some dogs, unfortunately, depending on the shelter, are only given 24, 48, 72 hours once that stray hold is up, which is ridiculous to me to expect any type of change in that short amount of time. But also understanding I saw a video 2 days ago of 6 dogs per kennel in one shelter. One volunteer said, I broke up 4 dog fights before 10 a.m. That's no life for these dogs. And until we change the reason why these dogs are ending up in shelters in the first place, it's something that we will have to continue making the difficult decisions and having these difficult conversations. And I'll be the first to say no one likes doing this. That's one of the big reasons why I quit was some days I would call my fiance crying, like, I euthanized 2 dogs before lunch. Like what? And I didn't want them to. And some of the times I worked with this dog for 6 months and it formed a bond and a relationship with me. but it was never able to generalize that with anyone else. And oftentimes it would be because staff members didn't have time. They had 200 other dogs, and I would use my breaks and my lunches and stay over unpaid to work with them. And it's not an expectation I could ethically place on everyone else. Hey, don't eat your lunch, go hang out with these dogs. But it's the unfortunate reality that we're in. And it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. Being EBI certified is what we call it here. Euthanasia by injection is horrible. And it's one of those things too, where staff members, it's not a veterinarian doing it, it's often staff members. And the way you get better doing something like this is through practice. It's a horrible thing.
Wow.
And these dogs have no idea that they're being walked to a euthanasia room, that this is their last interaction with us or the last time outside in a yard. That's such a surreal experience for me, is knowing a dog won't pass either medically or behaviorally. The shelter already let me know, I can only give recommendations. They make the ultimate decision. But I'm outside in a yard and I see sunlight glistening off their coat for the first time, and they're touching the grass, and I can see the dew, and it's your last time to do this. It's heartbreaking. It's a blessing to do what I do, but a horrible place to work. And my greatest empathies to anyone in this industry, anyone in rescue work, working with shelter dogs. It's a labor of love, but there's also a lot of compassion fatigue involved. And definitely take care of yourselves, because you cannot pour from an empty cup. And this is a very hard lesson that I had to learn the hard way, is sometimes we do have to take a break or step back and, say, I'm going to recharge my battery a bit, so when I do come back, I'm ready to go and to be my best for them as well.
Yeah. Well, I think you're an angel.
Oh, thank you. We do what we can. I do feel blessed. I know not everyone gets the opportunities to not just do what they love, but to help and to really offer a second chance to these dogs that otherwise wouldn't get it. And there's so many dogs where the staff tell me, Sada, I'm scared. I'm not taking this dog out. It's going to tear you apart. And 15 minutes later, we're all out in the yard together and we're playing ball, and hey, it was just the kennel. It was just a shelter. And how would your dog be if they were in this situation? Probably not faring too well either.
No.
Just cognizant of that goes a long way.
Yeah, I know exactly what my dogs would be doing. One of them would probably be in the corner being really fearful. One of them would be barking at anybody that went by. Yeah, it was just, it's stressful for them. But thank God for people like you, seriously.
Thank you.
Sada, I think we don't have any more questions coming through, so we might wrap up. If you've probably got some, you probably need some go and have a little break. I know you've been really busy lately, so
we're just gonna type some reports up, and we've actually got our own. The one that we're watching temporarily is an aggression case as well. Very fascinating, but just one final note, like, embrace this journey of learning. So I think one of the most important things we can do as either pet professionals or pet guardians is being open to new information and new techniques, and really being invested in our dogs' lives, not just as something in our home that we have control over, that offers us, gives us attention. It's understanding they are sentient beings. They are these creatures that are just as capable of joy or suffering as we are as humans. And when we learn to love the journey and not dread it, and that includes embracing the messiness of it, because never has my journey with any dog ever been perfect or linear, but I love it. That's what's beautiful to me, is that we grow together and we establish this relationship, this safety, this trust together. And from that foundation, everything else just blossoms. So I hope people really take that into account and take this time to reflect, and just maybe sit with your dog and not verbally ask them, but in your head, who are you? How are you feeling today? How can I help you as your guardian, support you in your life? Because they really don't have that much time with us. So it is a commitment. We did take on that responsibility, and I think they're owed all of it and so much more. They are really wonderful creatures, and I don't believe there are bad dogs. Even the ones where we find, we end up in this situation where we didn't want to reach that conclusion necessarily, but every single one of them, I think, has beauty inside. And it's our job to try to find that and bring that out. So thank you so much for having
I
me.
love that. Thank you, Sada. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I love talking to you, Sada. So yeah,
Thank
thank you
you
so
so
much.
much. I appreciate it. And anytime you want us, we are here to help and spread our
Yes.
message and support you guys however you need it. Thank you so much for offering this opportunity, not just to
Yeah.
us, but for all of these listeners and viewers. I think it's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So if somebody watching this is from a rescue or wants to, they can reach out on your website and learn from you guys. You've got some resources on there, haven't you?
Absolutely. Please do. So if you've got any questions, concerns, if you'd like some help or support, or if you just want to share some story or share what you're feeling and caring as well, we are here for it. So feel free to reach out on our website. It is www.wolfmothercanine.org. And our email address is info@wolfmothercanine.org. And definitely give us a follow on Instagram. Again, that handle is wolfmothercanine.org. We love showing our videos and sharing our journeys with these dogs and showing the world that it is absolutely possible and that we can lead with kindness.
Yeah. And Kim's just said such an incredibly emotional topic, isn't it? Just I thought I was going to start crying for a minute.
Always. Yeah. I'm surprised too. You could hear it in my voice a little bit, and it's tough to talk about. And I do appreciate everyone who's open and having these discussions. And, we carry this weight together. We are in this together, this fight together. It takes a village. And I absolutely appreciate every single one of you fighting this fight with us.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sada.
Thank you so much for having us. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day.